Yo, what is good? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have an amazing stream for today. We've got what if alt hist, all right, our Sigma chat, one of our favorite content creators, against Vaush, who is a political, I guess you could say, commentator on YouTube. He does a lot of debates, so I'm a little bit worried that our fucking alpha chat, okay, giga chat, is gonna struggle with that a little bit. I hope he doesn't. I'm hoping that he's gonna perform well for this debate, but I don't think he will. Hello, Jahira. How are you doing? I hope every time I pronounce your name, I fear, because the Spanish pronunciation is Jahira, but I don't know if that's correct in your country, in your language, which I think you're from the Caribbean, if I'm correct. Well, I don't want to, oust you right here. Okay, so there's no audio. What the fuck? Are you guys listening to the stream? Oh no, in all seriousness, I was really disappointed with how whatifalthist handled this. Let me put the chat because it's not showing right now. But you're already scaring me, dude. There we go. I can hear you. Okay, perfect. Hello. So, oh man, I'm really fucking scared. I don't know if I'm gonna enjoy this because this whole debate bro culture is really. I don't think we're really gonna get a. I don't know how good the debate's gonna be, but I've seen debates, especially like Vaush debates, and like he's really good. He's a really smart guy. Definitely, I'm not gonna deny that. But at the same time, like, because he's so good at debating, some of the real arguments of the other side tend to be a little bit lost. And I don't know. Oh yeah, the debate where whatifalthist insists there's no connection between the abolition movement and BLM, and that the postmodernists were actually crypto postmodern neo-Marxist from Frankfurt. Oh damn! Listen, I try to not get political. I think some of you know that I'm left-leaning, not like Vaush kind of left-leaning, but definitely closer to his side. And I do know that whatifalthist, at least he's like sort of centrist. I don't think he's a right-winger. So it's going to be an interesting debate. I hope they don't disagree that much. But yeah, just a little warning in advance. I'm kind of a fucking idiot, right? Like I'm not going to pretend that I am as smart as both whatifalthist and Vaush. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an economist. I'm not a political science major. So I'm just right here for the funsies, man. You know, I'm just here to like see how our beloved whatifalthist does on this debate. And yeah, maybe I'll give an opinion or two. I'll definitely do some commentary, but I'm not here to like criticize major. Well, I mean, I probably will criticize it, but just don't take my opinion too seriously because I'm not here to become a political YouTuber. I'm just here to see a content creator that I really enjoy. All right. But without further ado, hello, Thomas. What about this came off looking as pseudo-intellectual in this debate? Ooh, that's not a great look, to be honest. I'm scared, dude. I don't want to. Gosh damn it.
Know what else to say. May the best man win. I'm going to let Vaush on now, but now to see, can you all see me?
How are you doing? I'm doing great, man. Thanks. How are you doing? Testing my new mic setup. So hopefully it's it sounds neat, but I don't know. It does probably sound the same, right? I'm gonna get a couple of sandwiches. So hope that's okay with y'all.
Okay.
As I have seen some videos of Vaush, he gets angry fast, and he's kind of pervert, in my opinion, at least. I have seen he's definitely a very controversial person.
Hello. How you doing?
Oh my god, dude, this is gonna be good. I'm
can't complain.
I'm excited.
Sorry about the delay. There were some technical problems, and I did one debate I did one kind of Zoom YouTube interface like this before, but there was a glitch in my software, and so we had to.
Okay, let me know if you can hear
I'm
me
sorry
properly.
I left you all waiting. I know you've been going for a bit of time.
Oh, ain't nothing. We were talking about cartoons.
Oh, there it is.
Nice. My yeah, it's interesting. I think you could write a couple very interesting books on what cartoons symbolize in society, and like another big YouTuber, JJ McCullough, did a whole list of Canadian monster cartoons.
JJ,
and I thought that was a very funny book.
Yeah, well, you know, any excuse to see, you know, people punching holes through mountains or, you know, shooting lasers out of their eyes. I just like it when it looks flashy.
come on, let's see some
I
blood.
appreciate you hopping on.
Of course.
So,
oh man,
I had
I'm scared.
A couple of questions. You know, I don't formally structure anything, but I watched your video on social justice and a few videos later after that, and I had a couple of I don't know questions.
Okay, well, yeah, we're fucked. We're screwed. I haven't watched that debate on social justice, but I think I can imagine what he says. And of course, the debating social justice with someone like Vaush, it's dangerous territory. Man, this is gonna be so bad. Also needs to practice to take his time to formulate a more calm-sounding response. True, that's the problem with live debates, man. So much pressure.
Concerns that I wanted to talk about with you.
Okay.
So, I understand you mostly do historical content, which is not my field of expertise. I can't comment on it that
fuck you, Bosh.
But I do know that you've gotten some pushback for what you've put in those videos. And looking at your social justice video, I think I might understand a common trend. The main issue being, at least with regards to the social justice video, it feels like you came into that with a fairly strong pre-existing ideological bias, and all the information you had on all the many subjects that you touched on in that video.
I mean, come on, bro. Like, everything really can be called a bias, and that's a very dangerous route to go. Like, sure, I get where he's coming from, but like, we could probably use the bias argument for him. Let's hear what he says.
To narrativize them into a story consistent with your pre-existing beliefs. You know, like you looked up at the stars and you wanted to see a dinosaur, and it didn't really matter what the stars looked like. You had to find the dinosaur in the constellation. You know what I mean? So there were like a bunch of pieces of info there that I think were contradictory or didn't fit together that well, and it gave me the impression altogether that you were inconsistently reactionary in ways I wanted to talk about.
Oh no. There goes that word, reactionary.
So, as I've studied history, being fair and objective isn't giving 50-50 to both sides. Being fair and objective is looking for the truth and seeing where the truth leads you. And across history, you see periods of fanaticism. And we see a lot of the prerequisites for periods of fanaticism that exist today. And across history, you saw the French Revolution, you saw the religious fanaticism like the Puritans of the 17th century, you saw the Spanish Inquisition.
There we go. Dude, I love this. You know, he's getting all the historical facts. And I mean, he's kind of right. If you look at it from a... Because Vaush is a sociologist, so he's going to argue, I guess, I don't know. But, you know, the material conditions were very different back in the, 1770s and 1780s with the French Revolution than today. You know, there were very different situations. So maybe he's going to argue about that. And that's the difference between a sociologist and someone who study history. Of course, history is his stronghold. He's going to talk about history and he's going to compare today times, nowadays with, other historical events.
Before that, you saw the...
What are we watching? A debate between Whatifalthist and Vaush. Vaush, I don't know how to
the Black Death, because they felt guilt, that they felt immense survivor's guilt they were still alive. And before that, you had all sorts of things across the ancient world and peasant rebellions in the Middle Ages as well. And the common thread between all of these is that when times get tough like they are now, where basically average income has gone down, a lot of people live really hard lives in a lot of ways. And under those conditions, people get radicalized. And I think social justice is that radical movement, and
Yeah,
I
he's
try
correct.
to build my work for posterity. And because of that, I cannot stand aside when social justice, I think, is a radical movement, and to give it an objective opinion would be to state thus. And so, my argument going into it was,
I think the debate is about social justice. You know, Whatifalthist thinks social justice, in particularly the United States and Europe, is sort of radical. And Vaush, I think he hasn't talked yet, but you know, he sees it as more normal or fair or just.
that social justice is radical.
I think I'm personally kind of in the middle, but
I will prove as this debate goes along. But at the same time, I just wanted to make something that posterity would be able to look back upon, where every single era of history, you have the people who would basically say, we need to give both sides argument. And the truth is complicated. And because of that, you see all sorts of no one side can hold the truth, because no single worldview is capable of encapsulating it. But like before World War II, you saw people who thought that starting the war was not a good idea. Before World War I, you saw people who thought that war would never happen. And in every era of history, conventional opinion was wrong. And I want to look for when conventional opinion is wrong.
So the term radical doesn't really have a consistent.
okay, so he struggled a little bit at the end. I'm not gonna judge, because definitely if I were in his situation of debating live with someone that does debates on a regular basis, I would probably also be very nervous. But he definitely struggled there, and I've seen debates with Vaush, and I know that he's very capable of debating.
Consistent definition, but the way you use it suggests to me that you think it has a negative bent. You know, if you're going to argue that social unrest is often caused by inequality or tumult, then I would agree with that. You could go back to the suffrage movement, the civil rights movement. You could go back to the abolitionist movement or the Revolutionary War. You could go back as far as you wanted. And yeah, generally, when things are a little bit less steady, people too tend to commit harder to more radical ideas. I guess the problem that I have with the framing in your video is that that's a good thing. At least
the debate was bad, to be honest.
We're discussing now. I don't care about 50-50 representation for any given talking point, by the way. I only care about what's right. You know, you very specifically designate some types of social justice in your YouTube video as exempt from your criticism. Basically, the civil rights movement and back before then, also environmentalism.
I'd like to cut you off there for a second, please.
Sure.
In your video, you said the civil rights movement and the abolitionist movement were descendants of are the ancestors of social justice, which is not true. Social justice is an entirely different historic chain that you see start in the 40s to the 90s, basically, the post-war period. And that's a long period, but it did take a bit of time to evolve. So
I'd like to challenge you on that.
Sorry?
How? The civil rights movement was in the 60s, of course, so that would fit within that time range.
The civil rights period, it was entirely different groups of people. When you look at the logic of the modern social justice movement, it takes ideas that were invented by former Marxists in the post-war period and two broad groups, the Frankfurt School and French philosophers. And for example, the idea that gender can be separated from sex, that is that's an idea that hasn't existed for any other period of history except with Simone de Beauvoir starting in the early 50s. And then that idea was taken up by other philosophers like Judith Butler, like Foucault. And so the idea that
he just mentioned Foucault, it's gonna get serious.
Again, postmodernist idea from that period, from academia.
Please this is what I mean. Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to just go ahead and say a bunch of wrong things.
No, but I'd like to get
first of all, the civil.
You cannot construct my argument properly unless you hear it.
Well, but so far the construction is faulty.
Yeah, man, this is just gonna be like a random stream for the debate.
Was informed by Marxist ideas. Marx was around it absolutely was. The basis of critical theory, the idea that you should analyze. Well, don't get indignant already. It certainly was. Marxist social analysis has been influencing philosophers and activists for well over a century, and the conceptualization of gender and sex being, as you say it, uniform, until the past 50 years is completely ahistorical. There are entire modern civilizations that have had third genders, clearly not three sexes, three genders, for hundreds of years. That's just simply not true. But even if there were conceptualizations of modern social justice, which are a product of postmodernism exclusively, I wouldn't have an issue with that. You know, you'd have to demonstrate the harm done by those ideas.
Give me a hot second, because I'm going to reply to each of those. So for the first of them, the social justice movement didn't have ties to, sorry, Freudian slip that I'm sure you wanted me to have. The civil rights movement didn't have Marxist ties because that was something that the FBI explicitly looked for. And people really, really tried to attach a Marxist label onto Martin Luther King, but he kept very clear from it. And
he wasn't a Marxist.
Yeah, and much of the movement led by him did not have a
Okay,
lot of...
interesting conversation. Definitely a lot of the people involved in civil rights were Marxist or socialists. Well, the two terms are different, of course. But was the civil rights Marxist?
If they found
don't really think so,
attachment
but
to it, then the federal government would have basically just... Federal government and racists in American society at the time would have just used it to pillory the movement. And so it explicitly kept away. And it didn't really come from Marxist roots, because if you look at the liberation movements of that period of history, they came mostly from a liberal background. So full male suffrage, that was something that started in the early 19th century and progressed as male suffrage is tied to the amount of your male population that fought in the military. And so that came through liberals across the 19th century, and it continued into the early 20th century. With the suffragette movement, suffragettes were mostly upper middle class women who, again, came from a liberal mindset. And when you look at liberalism, it's the idea that all people have equal worth, and the equal worth under the law. And liberalism is a philosophy that's in many ways derived from Christianity, and thus under the objective legal eye of God. And that's just not the philosophy for Marxism. If the civil rights movement was infiltrated by Marxists...
Wait, hold on. I have to interject here. I never said the civil rights movement was infiltrated by Marxists. I said that his ideas and the ideas of the civil rights movement were influenced by Marxist philosophy, which they were. Liberal philosophers,
I could see that, yeah.
Political thinkers were influenced by what Marx wrote, because Marx was, well, he wasn't the only person who did this, certainly, but it's been mostly attributed to him, the ideas inherent to critical theory. Now, critical theory these days is taught to liberals and by liberals in a bunch of departments. It's not this, like, communist exclusive thing. They were pilloried as Marxist influenced the civil rights movement. So, you know, regardless of the extent of that influence, that was certainly something attributed to them.
I mean, realistically, everyone is influenced by every other philosopher. And give me a second to get back to some of the earlier points you made. But I mean, I'm influenced by I'm influenced by Marx. I'm also influenced by Zoroaster, Muhammad, by Foucault. And these ideas all mix together, and I don't see a trajectory.
He seems to be a fan of Foucault, though.
I don't think it's useful to parcel out what percentage of each philosophy. And yes, you could find some Marxist influence in the civil rights movement, but I don't think it's useful. And a point you made in your rebuttal to my video was that the abolitionist movement is part of the same trajectory as modern social justice, which just has no basis. The abolitionists were built out of the radical Republican agenda, which was a subset of the Republican Party that existed mostly in the upper tier of northern states. And their platforms were, in fact, trying to settle the Western frontier. They were very pro-capitalist, very
This
pro-business.
is an obfuscation.
They
So wait,
they were
what
a
I said-
remarkably imperialist party.
What
but they
I
were
said-
also
wait,
very
wait, wait.
pro-black.
The civil rights movement was full of fringe beliefs like black nationalism and Marxism. MLK was so successful because he at least tried to disassociate himself with those beliefs. True, and that's why people like Malcolm X, for example, were a lot more controversial. So
This is
And
a misinterpretation.
MLK did
again.
try to
I did not
disassociate
say
from those
These
beliefs.
were the
you
same.
literally
Like
said that in
100%.
my video.
No, I said that it was a continuation of the same historical trend. Now, obviously, if you say something is the continuation of the same historical trend and then go back 150 years, you will find that, in fact, earlier groups do have some different values. But the underlying trend is the acknowledgement of racial inequality and the desire to address it through civic, cultural, and legal systems to amend these problems both in representation and in economic outcomes. In that respect, that movement, the abolitionist movement, is identical to what we have today in many respects. Obviously, 150 years have passed. You know, settling the Western frontier isn't a cavalier idea in modern social justice movements.
I guess,
That's what it's
yeah.
all about, really, equality. And you can trace that back to the Enlightenment further beyond if you really wanted to.
I mean, realistically, the idea of racial equality and using legality to address racial problems, it's in many cultures. You see it in Islam. You see it in Christian societies in the Middle Ages. And if you can't draw a trajectory through the people themselves, you're not going to find a realistic continuity. What happened to those radical Republicans?
Well, the abolitionists that we think of, well, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois or like Frederick Douglass.
Middle-class people in the upper Midwest in New England. Meanwhile, the people who led the civil rights movement, they were predominantly Northeastern intellectuals who voted Democrat in the 1930s, as well as Jews who immigrated to Europe from 1900. I once went through a list of, I'm writing a cultural history of America.
That doesn't have anything to do with the ideological
trajectories of American ethnography.
But that has nothing to do with the ideological through line.
You do not find, it's a totally different demographic. Where
wait, we're not talking about demographics. Wait. What if
intellectuals that are the
we're not talking about demographics?
What if all this? You know, he calls it by the YouTube name.
Similar ideas are dissimilar because one of them was formulated by like Southern groups.
Hello, T-Man. I wonder if another historian will post an analysis of the arguments in the video. It would be very interesting, given how big the fan bases are.
I've never said this is exclusive to the West.
I hope someone does, and if someone does, please like tag me.
They wrote texts that were cited by Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King is currently the biggest, figure that's cited when talking about historical civil rights in the modern Black Lives Matter movement. So there is a definite continuous ideological trend from A to B to C, and I feel like the only reason you would deny that fact is because you like what the abolitionists did, but you don't like what BLM activists do today, and you have to explain that disconnect by somehow separating these extremely well-connected movements.
Bro, how many books on American intellectual history have you read?
No.
Give me some book titles to back up what you're saying.
We're going right to that. Wait, you need a citation on Frederick Douglass was cited by civil rights. Wait,
for the radical
you need a citation on Frederick Douglass was cited by civil rights thinkers? If you need a citation on that.
I will reference Battle Cry of Freedom to talk about the policies of the Republican Party by James
Yeah, I'm currently I'm currently reading Battle Cry for Freedom.
McPherson. Cynical theory to look at the development of how
just if you were curious.
Social justice movement developed.
Why not
for the Marxist movement in between, I'll quote the rise and fall of communism.
If you've read so much, then why not?
There are three different ideological trajectories.
Why not counter the argument then?
Because Confucian philosophy influenced the Enlightenment Europe. That
he's such a nerd, dude.
America is
I love him, but
of Chinese philosophy. It's creating a single logical line and then extrapolating an entire.
We're literally talking about the same goals in the same.
What happened to his ear, though?
You have the abolitionists who fought for racial equality for Black people.
Okay, I'm just gonna head out. I really don't like debates. I understand it, man. Good luck, and probably Friday I'll be back for another stream, like a more normal stream.
Quotes and heavily.
What's happening here? This needs a moderator. Yeah.
This isn't like.
This is a debate between Vaush and Whatifalthist about civil rights. They're arguing about BLM and its connection to both Marxism and the Civil Rights Act. BLM is Black Lives Matter in the United States, a social movement by African Americans protesting many things like police brutality. And Vaush says that this is connected to civil rights, which is understandable, but then like to Marxism, and which is like a little bit more blurry, while Whatifalthist says that it isn't. And yeah, it absolutely needs a moderator, and that's the problem with this debate, because this debate is not going to go anywhere. Like, none of them are going to agree with the other. They're just gonna keep their current
well,
points.
a butterfly flapped its wings in China, therefore that butterfly is responsible for the American Revolutionary War. Bullshit. This is a very direct line, and for you to respond to that with like a "how many books have you read" suggests to me a kind of, I don't know, insecurity in your ability to refute that fact. Why don't you believe these are part of the same movement? They're clearly fighting for the same thing.
The
No,
fact that
no.
you bring up no historical examples between the leaders of said movements or show that you've done research on the topic, because no one among historians, I have read nowhere that the modern abolitionist movement is a direct descendant of the is a direct
Two white dudes talking about race.
ancestor of the modern social justice movement.
I'm
And the
not
fact that you provide no
responsible for what
historical
you've
evidence,
read. And
and I have made my point. I'd
You-
like to ask you a question when you're done.
American
Well, you
politics
have
in
to answer
2022 be
mine.
like,
How are
I've
these
answered my
not-
question in the best way I can.
You've answered it by saying, I haven't read an answer to that. Like, you've answered my question by saying you don't know how to answer my question. I want a real answer. How
I've
are these
answered your
not the
question
same
in the way I
movement?
will.
Okay. So then I will follow through on that and say, since these are clearly part of a contiguous social trend in the United States, from A to B to C, it seems odd to me that you would denounce social justice when it happened before, or sorry, when it happens now, but you would accept it when it happens before. It's a really common trend in conservatives. Well, they'll go like, oh, of course I support the civil
he's
rights
calling him a
movement," and then they'll
conservative,
do
though.
all the same attacks on the modern BLM movement that conservatives did against the civil rights movement 50 years ago,
I have made my argument. You choose not to accept it. I'd like to ask you a question.
What was the argument? Can you repeat it for me?
No, I've already said it. The fans can go back and watch it.
What? But you didn't respond to it. You just said I haven't read in my books.
To briefly spend 5 seconds on this, I've said these movements are remarkably different demographics. You cannot trace a strong ideological lineage between them of
Wait, what do you mean
this group spoke to
demographics?
this group, which spoke to this group. Because of that, I think you are drawing a loose connection.
They're
and
different generations. Of course, they're different demographics. They're
I've
separated
answered the
by like
question.
50 years. Wait, do you not think a movement can be a part of the same contiguous like intellectual trend?
It
if
is, but you need to have
the
proof
different
for it.
links in the chain are in different time periods?
Bro, give me an example of a academic school created by radical Republicans in the mid 19th century.
Okay, yeah.
Give me an example.
He shouldn't be do this. I don't know. This is a fallacy. I don't remember the name of this fallacy. I don't know if it's like appeal to authority, but it's a fallacy, and he shouldn't have done this. What about this is more of a liberal than a conservative? Exactly. It's time like this that I'm glad I'm Mexican. Bro, I know, right? I'm just so glad that I'm not involved in any of this shit.
Of that school influencing modern East Coast, the modern leftist movement. Give me a historic lineage without just listing single figures.
I'm sorry. Can you find an example of Simone de...
Although, hey, he has a point, though. What about this right now has a point? A lot of the South, a lot of the civil rights movement started in the South. So we had the school incidents in Arkansas. Sorry if I can remember the names at the top of my head. A lot of it started in Georgia, Martin Luther King, Alabama. So a lot of this started in the South. I understand why he's saying different demographics, because it started in a different region of the country. A lot of it started in the South. Now, a lot of it is partially, California, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, the California coast, and maybe a little bit like New York, New Jersey, Chicago, that whole area in the northeast. So I do understand what he's saying, but it's just it's not really verbalizing it like that. He's using words like demographics. And it's not really demographics. African Americans then and African Americans now between the ages of 20 and 40, that's the demographics of the BLM movement and back then the civil rights movement. So I don't know about this, man.
Setting up any personal gender studies classes that
by liberal, I mean like a liberal, like neoliberal, right? Like a liberal capitalist.
Simone de Beauvoir had her philosophy influenced.
Well, I do live in the U.S., second-gen immigrant and all that.
Immigrated to America, she was part of the broader postmodernist.
Yeah, we're still outside of it, man.
Was in France in the 1950s.
Kind of like the abolitionists.
Meanwhile,
the broader racial equality movement.
The fact that you're interrupting me means that you don't want me to finish. The Frankfurt School, meanwhile, immigrated to America. The Frankfurt School people immigrated to northeastern cities, going to schools like Columbia, Harvard, etc. Thus, from the Frankfurt, and they also read a tremendous amount of postmodernism.
Wait, so they attended these schools?
and you can see the postmodernist philosophers descended from you can see the modern social justice philosophers descended from the postmodernism, where like
how?
Kimberly Crenshaw,
These are totally
Judith
different
Butler were
demographics.
students of Foucault. They were students of Marcuse. So
Okay,
and they
hold on.
literally write that. You can see that on their Wikipedia page.
So wait,
And then
earlier you
people in
said
the
wait,
modern-
Glad I'm not
people in the modern
American
you
either.
run on a train and try to make like
direct
30
lineage
points.
from
Bro, American politics are just horrible. They're just a mess, you know? One of those things that I mean, as a viewer, it's just funny to see them kill each other. But as if I was American, I would be kind of worried and concerned. Out of every single civil rights leader, I'm sure at least one had Marxist views, but I doubt MLA picked up Das Kapital and then became a civil rights activist. True, exactly. Because what if all this was saying is that, yeah, by that logic, if you don't think killing another human being is correct, then you're influenced by Jesus and Christianity. That's the logic. You can be influenced by most philosophies nowadays. Most people are influenced by Marx, whether they know it or not. Most people are influenced by Marx, things like organized labor. There's a lot of organized laborers that are conservative, but they are influenced by Marx. So are they like a Marxist movement? No, not always and not all the time. So
Please.
If Whatifalthist, instead of citing all of these authors, all of these books, he would focus on what Vaush is saying. He could have easily made a successful argument,
From Marx and from Simone de Beauvoir to the modern left.
You claimed, okay, that the teaching that gender and sex are separate is a product of like Frankfurt School postmodernist influence.
We're sometimes
So you now
way
need
too
to prove
culturally loud.
that postmodernists founded the American public school system.
They didn't.
Because they didn't. Well, then how can you say there's any connection whatsoever between postmodernism and the teaching of gender and sex being divergent concepts in modern public education? Those were set up by thinkers in the 19th and 20th centuries influenced by Enlightenment thinking. How could there possibly be any influence from postmodernism?
Ideas influence other ideas. Oxford is founded in the 12th century, but they're not teaching scholasticism anymore. And
what do you mean by that?
When you look
Ideas
at the
influence other
politics of
ideas.
teachers, they're overwhelmingly left wing. When you look at the politics of universities, overwhelmingly left wing.
You're doing a
These are
bunch of
people
points
who
again. What do you
studied
mean
under
ideas influence ideas?
I mean, if you want to simplify the whole world into a sentence, sure. But Vaush, there's a question I'd like to ask you.
No, wait, what do you mean? Because you said there's no way the
please.
abolitionist movement could inform
We've
the
spent
civil
half an
rights
hour
movement.
talking. We've spent 20 minutes on this question.
Well, it's very silly because
Why are you trying to avoid my
essentially
question?
admitted to not answering it. You said there's no way the
Bro, I
abolitionist
answered the
movement
question.
could
You're
have
not going
led
to
to
get
the
anything
civil
else
rights
out of me
movement.
past this. You're not going to
Because
get me to talk on this question anymore.
They're different demographics. And then you said I'd need to show that a Republican abolitionist school set up and then is being cited by West Coast intellectuals today. But then you're like, well, Frankfurt's responsible for all of modern education, teaching gender and sex are separately because like you realize these are incompatible talking points. You can't run away from that. You can't believe both of those things at the same time.
Bro, I answered the question.
I don't know, man.
Like, I answered the
you
question
answered it
to the
wrong.
amount I
You were
like to desire
incorrect.
to.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Ask me a question. We'll
Okay.
take turns.
In the rebuttal to my video, you said that international productivity statistics, the only way you can argue them is since racism, because every single area of the world really has the same productivity. Would you like to back that up, please?
Wait, what?
You're going to need to specify more. What did I say?
So you
exactly?
said, for example, I said that people in the third world are paid less than people in the first world because they have lower productivity rates. Thus, according to market standards, you cannot pay them less and have a functioning economy. You said that according to what you have found, that all areas of the world have the same productivity. And so the only way you can use that argument is racism.
Yeah, Whatifalthist is absolutely correct on this. For example, think about a farmer in Germany who has access, to better technology, better farming techniques than a farmer in, let's say, Mexico, for example. I know that water usage in Mexico is a lot of water is wasted. when it comes to farmers here are not as productive as farmers in the USA. I guess that Vaush probably is thinking in terms of like work hours or labors. Sure, a farmer can work 8 hours in the US just as it can work 8 hours in Brazil or South Africa, right? I guess he's viewing it from that point of view, but it's not only about the amount of work you do, but what can you do with that amount of time? You know, how much work can you do? And when you have access to better technology, better education, like a lot of places in the first world, you are going to be more productive. Economies are wealthy based on productivity, you know? The more productivity your population has, the wealthier your country's going to be. It's just like basic economics. I don't know why Vaush would disagree with that point. I guess, again, like I'm saying, he's probably seeing it from like hours worked on
Nobody's paid for their productivity.
Yeah, they are.
No, they're
Wages
absolutely
across
not.
history, and you can run computer models for this.
Yeah.
Wages across history.
Oh, yeah,
are
he's right.
A
He's
combination
correct.
of scarcity of labor and productivity.
So
There's a couple historians like Angus Madison and Peter Turchin who do a really wonderful job of.
He shouldn't be doing
computer
this.
models
Like,
to predict wages across
So
history
the
using
problem-
those metrics, and
the
they get
problem
it
with
right.
you were asked me a question. The problem with computer models is that people think the output is objective, when in fact the output is largely determined by the preceding input that humans put in. There have been studies shown indicating that in terms of the actual physical productivity, the actual amount of goods produced by a factory worker in China, Mexico, and America, you're not going to see significant differences in productivity. You will see significant differences in pay. The reason for that, well, it's complicated, but the idea of wages tracking perfectly on their productivity is just not true. In fact, often people in China and Mexico work quite a bit harder than we do in factories that are just as productive as ours, funnily enough. You know, they can make, cars or cheap widgets at, the speeds we can or better. It's, entirely
Okay.
doable. The issue that I have is that oftentimes people will use
Let's hear what he has
productivity
to
as a
say.
kind of,
Let's
moralistic presupposition by which they like determine the worth and the value of a country. Often the economic output of a country,
because he could also be talking in terms of factory work. Yeah, true though. But the thing is, sorry, these chips are spicy as fuck. Yeah, if you work at a McDonald's in Mexico or the US, it's gonna be the same productivity because you're working in the same process, right? McDonald's work the same pretty much everywhere. They have the same industrialized process, but it's not in all industries. It's not the same. The US relies a lot more on services than Mexico does. So you can't measure just a country productivity by saying, oh, well, a factory worker in Mexico and a factory worker in the US do the same. So the productivity in both countries is basically the same. Sure, but you're just looking at one segment of the population. There's a lot less factory workers percentage-wise in the US than there are in Mexico. Mexico has a lot more factories. The US economy is mostly based out of services. It's like 80%, I think. So again, this example of the factory work, it works as an analogy, but when you compare two economies, it's just not the same.
is determined by.
But I understand what he's saying.
It's kind of like a cyclical problem, right? There could be two countries, one very wealthy, one very poor, where the poorer country produces far less, not as a product of any actual like tendency to work from the people who live there, but rather just because they don't have access to the startup capital, and then they get lower wages for what?
This is true.
Not for working less hard, for having the misfortune of being born into a poorer country. That's the issue that I have.
That's the theory you posit would result in the collapse of the modern world economy.
Oh, that's such a libertarian answer. I love that. Continue.
But
please.
the thing is, and also, you would not find a single economist who could agree with that, or you could not find more than a handful in extremely radical sects.
How would it collapse things?
And that's because productivity stats vary massively by nation, and that there's no way else it could be because you.
What up, guys? Hope y'all are doing well. Thank you, brother. You too.
Machinery in different areas. You have people who work differing amount of hours. You have differing supply chains involved.
Do you think
for
workers
example,
in China
people in
work fewer
Mexico
hours
are
than
exceptionally
workers in America?
hardworking, but the coal doesn't get to where they are. The coal, let's say they're running a factory, the coal doesn't get there. They're working on poor machines. Their wages get stolen, so they leave work. The Mexicans would be extremely hardworking, but they would have lower productivity. And what you say about countries not getting capital, that's not true. This is the era of the highest capital availability in the history of man.
Do you think Mexico gets the same capital investment as
the U.S. has given 4 times the amount of capital to Africa than the Marshall Plan. If you look at countries like Argentina hyperinflates its currency on average every
This
11
is completely
years.
irrelevant. To
And
what we're
because
talking
of
about.
that, but they keep on getting Western capital since there's so much capital.
That has nothing
Very
to do with what
easy.
we're talking
This has
about.
been the year of the
Do you
fastest
think
growth in the third world
do you
because of
think
capital
Mexico
availability.
has the same capital investment per capita in terms of their industry, like as America?
Sorry, who?
Do you think that America and Mexico
I
have the
mean,
same?
no, what he's saying, I mean, it's totally correct. Farm work is different all over the world. The technological gap is vast around our planet. Yeah, that's exactly it. And they should be talking about this. Okay, there is inequality. How can we solve that? How can we solve this gap of technology, of knowledge, of capital? But instead, what if all this is mentioning all these books and all this academics? Sure, it's very impressive. Don't get me wrong. Like I said at the beginning, very smart guy, much smarter than me. But that's not gonna solve anything, dude. Vaush is just ignoring that.
Same amount of startup capital available for people to start and develop businesses within their.
But that's
countries.
that's due to a shit ton of historic factors.
Yeah, but
America and
do
Mexico.
you agree? Wait.
Why are we
Yes.
paring down
Wait.
historic
Oh wait, hold on.
factors down
I
to
agree.
aggression?
Wait, one thing at a
America
time.
has different
I
geography.
agree.
It has a different history. It has a
Oh
different
my
government
God.
system.
Yes,
And-
I
and
agree.
So why is
They're
all of that being
different
compressed down to
countries.
racism?
I agree. Wait, hold on. Calm
You
down.
said that the only
You're very.
definition
Oh
you could
my
use
God!
for
Please,
differences
please.
in productivity
I'm
work
begging
is
you.
racism.
Calm.
Please explain.
I wasn't accusing you of being racist right here. I
You
was
literally
asking
said
you.
that.
Calm.
Go back
Please
into the video.
quit being
It's like
defensive.
the 14
Wait,
minute
please,
mark. Go ahead and
please.
look at it.
Oh my
Like,
God!
I
Please.
just-
I'm
there's
begging
no way,
you.
There's
I was
no way
asking
you
you
could not
a
be proven
question.
wrong
I
here.
was asking you a yes/no question at the beginning before I answer. Please, this isn't a gotcha. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm trying to answer
sure
the
you know
damn
about
question.
gotchas.
No, I don't. I don't gotcha
It's your
people.
entire fucking channel.
They walk directly into walls over and over again. I'm not trying to gotcha anyone, okay? I was asking, like, I just asked you, you acknowledge these countries have different capital available for business development, which, of course, obviously they do. No one would argue that. Yes, it's because of historical factors. I'm not denying that. We're not at the racist part yet, okay?
Yet.
So the studies that I've seen on relative worker productivity have been pretty consistent. The idea that a Chinese worker, I don't have any, but if you'd like me to send them to you later, I'd be happy to pull them up.
Okay.
I don't have all of them archived right now.
How many economics books have you read? Give me your top 3.
All of them.
Give me your top 3.
I can't. I enjoy all of them equally.
Oh.
So anyway, I hope you understand that behavior like that is very unbecoming in a media conversation. It just makes it seem like you don't have an argument for the field, so you have to run back to the bleachers. Look, in China, factory or sweatshop workers, okay, from what I've read, and this seems to be pretty consistent, they produce as much or more than factory workers here in America. It's not like factories in China are like underproducing. It's like an industrial powerhouse of the planet, but they still get paid way, way, way less. Now, you said that the world economy would be torn apart by the idea that wages aren't proportional to productivity, which is a very funny and very libertarian thing to say. It's like, if my 101 econ models aren't perfectly predictive of the most complicated system in all.
I mean, this also has to do with the fact that, the supply and demand of labor. Cheap Chinese labor. I mean, I understand the ties to productivity, but it's also about, there's a lot of Chinese workers, so they're going to get paid little. There's less American workers, and they produce a lot with, those numbers, so they're going to be paid more.
Of human existence.
Holy fuck. Good God, yeah, it is.
Then the idea that
Jesus, this debate, yeah, it is horrible.
Track perfectly onto productivity.
Yeah, do you have an idea? Can you have something you can shove into a computer simulation?
You should watch the debates between Vaush and Destiny. Some of them are just fucking shit shows.
Wages come out. Wages as they've existed over the last 1,000 years.
Nobody can.
Yes, they can.
Absolutely, they
there's
cannot.
Loads of historians, Peter Turchin, Angus Madison, who have been able to predict wages across history.
You can
Bro, he's such a nerd in a good way,
Wage supply.
Yeah. Wait, averages? Well, I thought we're talking about productivity.
So,
Wouldn't
for
productivity
example,
vary between
the Turchin
individuals and the
economic
population?
models were able to predict wages across England from looking at the population and the product and the land.
We're not talking about averages. What would that have to do with productivity?
Averages of productivity
is attached to how much soil you have. And for example, you can look at stats across the 19th century, look at increases in mechanization and increases in industrial ability, and then from that,
so I'm going to try this a third
population
time.
of that and get wages.
What does this have to do with productivity. Averages, when you look at averages, you're looking at like a total social development, not productivity. If we want to find a model that determines wages based on productivity, you'd have to have a very specific and very fine-tuned algorithm that you can punch a bunch of pre-existing characteristics into and get an individual's wages. Because otherwise, we're not really talking about.
China is nowhere near the cheapest place to work anymore, but the government artificially controls currency to somewhat offset this. Yeah, this is so true. Actually, now Mexican labor is cheaper than the average Chinese labor, so definitely China, like a bad example for this. Maybe like India, Bangladesh would have been an interesting example to explore. A third party should have been there to modify the debate. Oh yeah, dude, absolutely, 100%.
About productivity, we're talking about like available wealth in a society, and that I agree with. On average, you can.
Yeah, and we can get individuals' wages. It's median income versus average income versus gross GDP. And the stuff I'm talking about is talking about average income and median income. What I'm talking about is very little relation to gross national GDP.
Wait, how do you? So wait, how?
Because gross national GDP is a very flawed way of measuring someone's wealth, or the wealth of your average citizen. I like the measurement of the median income, not GDP per capita, but median income. That's nice. I like that. I like that touch. Watching this makes me root for the sun to shoot the Earth with a solar storm and send the whole Earth back to the Stone Age. It is so useless. I mean, this debate.
Individuals' income.
I'm truly sad because with all the intellect that whatifalthist has, he could have destroyed Vaush in this debate. But unfortunately, he's just getting lost on the details and the authors and the name of the books and the citations. Kind of petty, though, because I know that he could have given
you look what their
more economic arguments.
Is
how?
Basically, the amount of capital they produce. And
how do you measure that?
It differs from society to society. In agrarian societies, it's farmland and productivity of said farmland.
Yes.
In industrial societies.
Yes. Finally, dude. A U.S. economy, the economy of Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, Germany, Denmark, the United Kingdom, these are places that rely on services. You know, insurance, banks, blah, 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 tech companies, right? Those are services. You cannot compare that productivity the same way that you can compare a country that's either mostly agrarian, like a lot of them in Africa and South Asia, and a lot of them that are industrial, like China. A farmer, a factory worker, and a lawyer are not going to have the same levels of productivity. You can't measure them just by how much they work, you know? Oh, they all work 8 hours a day, so they produce the same. No. A lawyer has an education. A lawyer can produce more valuable services, you know? It's time. It's got to be paid more. A farmer can only produce so much, and especially when you consider the technological gap that exists. Finally, he's getting to the argument I wish he would have stated, you know, back like 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. Comparing U.S. productivity and Mexico productivity is wrong from the start because Mexico is a more industrial economy. The U.S. is a service-based economy. Jesus.
In a modern service economy, how would you even begin?
Modern service economy, but you were mentioning Mexico or China. All right. So, and probably Mexico has also like majority services, but probably the Mexican economy is between like 50 and 60% services. I know that the U.S. economy is well over 80% services. It's not the same though. It's a big difference.
In a modern service economy, you would, so let's say you take Starbucks as a business. You took at the total revenue of said Starbucks. You look at the amount of coffees made per individual. You look at the amount of revenue from the Starbucks. You look at how it's cleaned. I know it's imperfect, but once you get averages, all of these things are cleaned up. And technically,
she wasn't prepared for this.
The train of logic you're operating under basically says science.
Human ego gets in the way of everything. Oh yeah,
right. People the barista gets paid the same amount whether they work a morning shift in a downtown location or the evening shift in a rural location that gets 100th the amount of customers. They get paid the same amount as long as they're in the same state.
But on a macro scale, it alternates over time according to broader productivity variables.
Macro, I thought we were looking at individuals. Macro,
you divide up global productivity stats and then put it on individuals. Like, I'm not going to educate you for an hour and a half.
This is the human ego. Exactly there it goes.
There's no way to determine productivity empirically when looking at individual statistics, because all you can defer to is broader economic trends.
I'll send you all this stuff on Twitter after. I'm not going to waste the audience's time for an hour talking about this.
Feel free to. So
okay.
The point that
I'd like to move on to another question.
Oh, I didn't even get to why it was racist, but yeah, okay.
Okay. In my video, since communism.
All right. Well, man, I'm not even close to being able to talk about this stuff. Britain stopped being industrial like 4 years ago when the government closed the mines and heavy industry. Exactly. And that's where the problem is, because Vaush's point, at least what they were talking about, is, oh, the third world gets paid less because you know, of racism. That is not true. The third world gets paid less. Sure, there's probably like a historical oppression factor to take into consideration. Sure. Absolutely. But also because it's less productive. Most of the third world economies are industrial and agrarian, resource-based, right? Like a lot of Africa. We saw a video, I think, on the resource trap, right? That how having a lot of resources is not going to necessarily save your economy or make you wealthy. That's how most third world economies operate. Most first world developed economies operate as services in service economies. So it's wrong to make that comparison between the productivity of the third world and the productivity of the third world. What Whatifalthist should have done is, instead of mentioning Starbucks, which I think it's a bad example, should have mentioned something like a bank. You know, the US, the UK, Hong Kong, they have some of the biggest banks out there. And you cannot compare how a bank operates than how a farm in the Congo operates, or a diamond mine, or a coffee farm in Colombia, you know?
Communism has since communism has failed on every single continent in every single civilization. And why do you consider yourself an anarcho-syndicalist in basing your theories upon a theory of the world that
has failed?
Doesn't seem to have matched up to scientific standards?
What scientific standards have my personal beliefs not matched up to?
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I'm not you, Vaush. I don't know your life, but why would you push this view upon the world?
Well, for a number of reasons. Obviously,
I mean, sorry to cut you off, but I have a final question. How would an anarchist state manage a war with an external power or manage a financial crash?
What the fuck?
No, how would an anarchist state manage a war with an external foreign power? Let's say your anarchist France and Germany invades. How do you get a military together and
That's a good question, though.
I don't think anarchism can survive outside of a global model. I don't advocate for it unless you're in some.
And why would a global model exist?
Well, if the world was ready to move to anarchism,
and why would the world move towards this progression?
Because I think that anarchism is the logical end state of a series of pre-existing social, economic, and political factors, which I do think are desirable in and of themselves. And then ideally, after those have sort of fermented across the world, you would have an opportunity for global anarchism. But I consider that a very distant, like that's very...
The amount of money required to assess each locale in each state for an appropriate wage by comparing relative purchasing power and then setting prices of each product appropriately is complex. Exactly. And we're talking about state-by-state comparisons. Imagine comparing two economies of two very different countries.
Very much like
it's not, and I hate Vaush because of this argument. It's not about racism, all right? It's very complex. It varies from state to state, and things like purchasing power. It's not easy, you know?
Rapture moment, ye off in the distance. Until then, I care mostly about the advocacy of anarchist principles, if the society is a bit out of reach for now.
So what would examples of anarchist policies you push be?
Policies of push. Oh, okay, a little bit of a contradiction there, but I get what you mean, of course. You know,
so okay.
I like this. I like this section of the debate. You know, this is now more calm. You know, he's asking questions to, I guess, understand Vaush's positions. I thought he was more of a socialist, but I think he's an anarchist then.
Line with anarchist political beliefs.
Yes, yeah. As Vaush, as an individual.
Well, socialism is more of an economic.
What are policies that you think will lead us towards said anarchist utopia?
There we go. That's the better question.
You're putting a big weight on my shoulders here.
I mean, you're a political thinker. It's your job.
Well,
Oh,
yeah, though legislating
oh
anarchism is
man, a little bit
definitely a
aggressive.
tall order. But so a couple of things. Obviously, I think taxes should be higher. I think the fruits of those taxation, should be put towards a welfare state. I think that severe regulatory penalties can be placed on the financial markets and higher specific taxes on the wealthy, on capital gains.
Okay.
And I think a sort of financial easing into market socialism would be something that I find ideal. With the idea being you eliminate the bourgeois as a class, you ensure that industry is controlled collectively by the proletariat. Nationalize a few industries. I can think of a few.
Yikes! 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 He's an anarcho-syndicalist, meaning he's a socialist and an anarchist. Yikes! Not to mention the effects that colonialism and neoclassicism have had on the world. Yeah, exactly. Huge effects. But it's not the only thing, right? Especially talking about modern countries. There are colonial societies that... Oh, I thought it went for a minute. There are colonial societies that are pretty successful countries. A lot of the Gulf states, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, countries like Panama, Costa Rica, Uruguay in South America, and many, many others. Those are the ones that I can name on the top of my head. But these have been colonialist, countries that were colonized, yet are still successful economies, at least sort of, that can provide to a certain extent a good quality of life for their citizens. So I think it's just a very cheap argument. And for what he's saying, I definitely don't agree with that. Because you do know, does he realize that people can open, at least in the USA, co-ops? That means that the workers own the company. People can do that nowadays. There's no regulation preventing workers from owning a business, from opening a business. There's nothing preventing, like all of us on the stream, taking our savings together and putting them into a business and all of us owning the business as the workers. There's nothing preventing people from doing it today. Why are people not doing it? I personally believe that's not human nature. And, markets at the end of the day are sort of regulated by human nature, right? When we have fear, the markets go down. We have a stock crisis. We have a recession. When the market is feeling optimistic, stock go up, earnings go up. So I'm not an economist. I never did an economy major, so I don't understand these subjects fully, and I haven't read his whole positions on socialism. But I'm just saying, if you're in America, you can open a co-op and own the means of production. But people don't really do that, do they?
That could do for a little bit of a takeover, that kind of stuff.
Such
And,
as?
it'd be very complicated long term. Such as
What industries would you like to nationalize?
the pharmaceutical industry is a big one. I think you can make a really strong
Honestly,
argument.
I agree with that. I think
Okay.
I think government should control health.
Yeah, I agree.
And also a massive takeover of local transit.
I agree with that.
Okay,
Actually,
yeah.
I agree with it in
Train-filled.
some states, not others, because you see varying different attitudes toward.
Yeah, I think we can see that, right? Health, I think that should be, that is one of the main flaws of the American system, not having a nationally controlled healthcare, at least controlling the industry. Medicine in America is so expensive. At the very least, there should be some regulation on those like medicine prices. And at the very extreme, a national healthcare industry. We need to move past our human nature, though. True. I don't like his view on free markets being intentionally oppressive. Free market is more of a description of processes like how osmosis describes how money moves in and out of a system. It really, that's how it is.
Government takeovers depending on the society, where in like Sweden or South Korea, it goes very well, but in Italy or in Brazil, it goes terribly. So I'm from Philadelphia. Whatever the government controls is just, it doesn't work. But in Minnesota or Massachusetts, I'd support it.
I'll make the trains run on time. I'm well and train pilled. The energy industry will get that one.
Isn't
stuff
that
like that.
one of this? Isn't one like r/neoliberal obsessed with trains?
Yeah, but we don't accept them. The lefties are more obsessed with trains. We
The
like it
leftist.
more. Trains are good. I like trains. You know, an end to car dependency would be an ideal. My housing. My basic goal would be
Well,
nationalized
housing.
industries that have inelastic demand, and
That's an interesting one. Housing. How would the government control housing? How would you control a house in, let's say, downtown Los Angeles and a house in rural Oklahoma? You know, what if people don't want to live in Oklahoma anymore because, you know, the government controls housing? Are you going to make all houses at the same cost, you know, per square feet? Are you going to give housing for free to people? Like, how would that work? I'm interesting to. I'm not discrediting it right away. I'm not writing it off, but I would love to hear more because I think that's one of the worst things. You know, having a government controlled housing. It doesn't sound like something you would want, but
worker
okay.
control for everything else, and unions for workers within government enterprises, which of course cannot be controlled by the workers because they're ostensibly controlled by the people.
I don't think unions are controlled by the people. In Philadelphia, the union controls the city, and it literally like beats up its opponents, and it's led the city to have a smaller population today than it did in 1950.
Yeah.
No, I mean
And talking about unions, I'm not a huge union guy because here in Mexico, we have some of the strongest unions in Latin America. Well, strongest, quote unquote. And it just leads to a lot of corruption, a lot of, you know, you're sort of replacing the government or the CEOs with the union leaders, you know? They're not always necessarily controlled by the people, and sometimes the people at the top of those unions can lead to a lot of corruption, a lot of problems, and I don't know. I understand the need for unions, especially in the USA, but
government's controlled by the people.
And I think that's a problem with leftists, where leftists will say,
whoa. Okay, that was an interesting phrase he said. Governments are controlled by the people. Well, yeah, technically. I mean, the Mexican government, again, you know, talking about Mexico, technically the Mexican government is controlled by the people, technically. But in reality, there's a lot of corruption. So the thing I don't like about socialism has always led to a lot of corruption between states and governments. So I understand that technically the governments are controlled by the people, but even in places like Sweden and Iceland, you know, y'all remember the Panama Papers? There was a lot of corruption on Iceland, and on Iceland, prime minister or president. So I don't know, guys, you know. From what I've read, a lot of farmers, as an example, would be described as reactionary because why would they want the government to control their livelihood to make money and feed the people? True, you know? Why would the government sell their product? Singapore is decent with housing, but there's no way in hell any U.S. citizen is going to agree to Singaporean government-style authoritarian housing policies. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, exactly. You know, the land of the freedom, America is going to agree to Singaporean-style laws. Like, you know, chewing gum is illegal, I think, in Singapore. You know, it's very... I don't think Americans would like that, even like left-leaning Americans. Free housing is surprisingly doable. As much as they sucked, the Soviets did make free housing for their population. I would have to read more on that. You know, again, I'm not writing it off, but I just have to read more because what if housing is a huge deterrent for people to move to expensive zones, right? Expensive areas. How would that work? You know, you can't make you can't just give houses in downtown Manhattan and then like rural Kansas, you know, those places are not the same. So I'm very uneducated about that.
Concentrate power in good people, but once you say we're going to concentrate power in good people, bad people start showing up because they get the label good people.
No,
Exactly.
I mean, the government's controlled by the people. The unions only ever
Is the government controlled by the people?
I said ostensibly, you know.
Give me a country where you could say America, but like, how do you factor that in with the vast majority of governments across history being autocracies run by a kind of ruling class, like a nobility, like a secret police, like a priest class? And how do you do that with every single leftist country, with the exception of countries like Sweden per se?
What leftist countries?
Almost every leftist country does end up autocratic.
Yeah.
Like
So
which?
why would giving the government more power mean it maintains being in the hands of the people?
Well, like what am I being compared here?
You're being compared to every single. Tell me what you are. Tell me what country you'd like to copy across
Well, I'm
time.
a socialist. I don't want to copy any country.
He's an
I'm not even a
anarchist.
statist.
Yeah.
If you're
But
not
I don't
copying
think there are
countries, then you're shooting in the dark.
No, because we see policies that we know might work, and we can isolate them and
How do you know
Might.
they
them
might
in
work?
application.
You know,
Because
let me tell you a story.
Wait. Because you can take a look at isolated policies
Okay.
where they function in a given city or in a given state or in a given district, and you can try to determine the effect they'll have in a
I
broader.
miss
And if
Rome.
we end up being a bit experimental,
Good evening.
you know, so
How
are
are
the
you
founding
doing?
fathers, okay?
I miss
I am,
Rome.
you know, the apple is not fallen far from the cherry tree.
Which is something I've seen across history, where every single state that tries to deviate.
I mean,
from
there
the
might be
norm
a time in history where people say, "I miss America." You know, I miss the
what the
United
pre-established
States.
principle is fails. French Revolution killed millions of people. Russian
what about
Revolution
us?
killed millions of people. Chinese Revolution killed millions of
Oh,
people.
what about us?
Taiping Rebellion, which is a Christian fanatical sect in China, third bloodiest war in history. Every single time you try to make a revolution, make a new utopia fails. And
What about
revolutions that
us?
succeed are those that work.
But we're not
on
trying to make an utopia, though.
Existing systems like the Glorious Revolution in the UK, the American Revolution, Europe.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. At least historically, every revolution to create an utopian society has resulted in massive failure, right? French Revolution and Robespierre ended up a fucking crazy ass. Well, could you call him a megalomaniac? I don't know if that's the correct word, but he was definitely fucking insane, right? And he started as a big boss revolutionary guy. Same in Cuba, same in Venezuela, right? Modern revolutions, and then what he's mentioning, like the Taiping Rebellion. He's right. Historically, he's correct, you know? No, the Empire era. The problem with American politics is that Americans will spend here on a toilet on Twitter to simp for politicians' ideals, but never actually take 30 minutes of their day to actually read their policies. Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. American politics are like a big show, you know? I like to use the example of the elections. You know, the elections are a massive show, you know? You've got all these TV networks creating animation. It's almost like a holiday. The revolution failed, but it did succeed in destroying the aristocracy. That's true, though. From my observation, America is just ruled by political family dynasties. Yo, that is actually like really true, and nobody really talks about that much. You know, the Kennedys, the Bushes, now the Obamas, probably soon enough, and there's probably many others that we're not mentioning that are smaller. But yeah, it is. Like nobody really talks about that. Say the Republic era for Caesar. The revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. Oh man, we're gonna get into controversial topics right here in chat.
And others, and I'm glad we agree on that.
Wait, all these revolutions were predicated, at least in some respect, off of the society they were built upon.
So is everything.
Right. I don't think the French Revolution was any more a rejection of the previous principles of its nation
Yes, it was.
than the American was for the
It was
colonies
totally
that it
was,
came
bro.
from.
Like in the French Revolution. Let me.
So was
finish.
America.
The French Revolution outlawed religion. It killed hundreds of thousands of people. It created.
It created its own religion, dude.
It renamed the names of the weak.
Yeah.
It killed 5% of the population.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, it went so far as to renaming the fucking days of the week. I mean, it went pretty far. I mean, if we're talking about changing the society you were previously on, it definitely went really far. The French were probably one of the ones that went the most far.
It took the entire economy into the state's hands in the Revolutionary War. The U.S. Revolution basically just said, you can keep your colonial legislatures, but we're getting rid of England, and we're going to make a really weak central.
Yes.
All the things the French Revolution did were based on Enlightenment principles, which was the ideological history.
So was the
of
American
that nation.
Revolution.
I agree. That's my point. Yeah, I think that these revolutions are just difficult business, and sometimes they succeed and sometimes they don't.
But if
but
every
I'm not
revolution
talking
that
about
tries to
revolution.
break from
I've never
precedent
mentioned
fails,
revolution for
if
my
you can trace
system.
that back to ancient history, why would you go with that precedent? Why wouldn't you follow the precedents that work?
Neither did. Do you think that they were following
The
a
American
precedent when they
Revolution followed
became?
the
Wait, please. You think they were
Please.
following a precedent when America like became a democracy? Like, of course
Yeah.
not. Obviously not.
England was a democracy beforehand. All of the
Wait.
local governments kept their power in America.
Wait.
They,
Wait. How was England a democracy?
It was a parliamentary system.
Wait,
they
hold
had
on.
They had two separate parties, the Whigs and the Tories. They would alternate power. You had prime ministers, all that stuff. Also, got to tell you, I need to run at 9.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. My bad. I understand. It was a monarchy.
But it was it's like Britain today, but to a lesser degree. It was a monarchy with a republic, with a monarchy with it was a monarchy with a democracy as well.
All right.
The Americans just couldn't vote and said democracy because the Americans were treated under the British system like they were a subject nation that Britain conquered, like India. But at the same time, the Americans said that they were Englishmen and thus deserved to get voting rights.
They were.
Yes, exactly.
It was not a democracy. It was a parliament.
I mean, fuck you, Bosch. No, what I think Whatifalthist meant is that it had a lot of democratic systems, you know, a parliamentary system that was, I think by the time, fairly new. I mean, what he meant by, yeah, it was a monarchy, but not a monarchy like most monarchies at the time, you know, the German families, the Habsburgs, the French monarchy before the revolution. So it was democratic, maybe not like full-on democracy. But it's still a monarchy today. Britain is still a monarchy.
Parliamentary monarchy.
All right, but it's.
Are we going to say the only democracy in the world are New England town halls?
The most powerful person in England was there by blood. In America, the most powerful person, Washington, was elected, admittedly by white landlords. You know, so
that's not true. 70% of them. Oh, yeah, landowners is accurate for the South.
Yeah,
in the North, almost everyone could vote. Yeah, but I mean, by that logic, Britain is not a democracy today.
No, because the Queen doesn't have any power now. The function of the government.
The most powerful people in Britain, the people making the most decisions at the time, were prime ministers. Lord North was the guy who Lord North, the prime minister of the Tory party, was the guy that masterminded the American Revolutionary War.
The king had enormous power at the time that we left. No, this is highly tangential.
Okay, then,
you said you have to leave in 7 minutes.
Then it's an integrated system. It's part democracy, part monarchy. Okay.
So let's get to try to get to the
they're fighting over semantics, really.
Experimentation.
They also pulled in the Greeks and the Romans and several Native American states in the New World.
Sure, and
Marx
did as well. Marx's theories were derived.
American politics is pro wrestling.
Hegelian insights.
But Hegel didn't build a state. Hegel was just some nerd in Germany.
Shit's going down in chat, guys.
America, we were building it upon a precedent of pre-existing states.
I'm not talking about state making. I'm only
Nero
talking
was
about
gay.
Marx made a philosophy that people build states off. The Marxist
Caesar
Bible
did nothing wrong. Caligula was based, and Nero was
using
awesome. Nero was gay.
A philosopher's view to construct an entire civilization, and whenever that happens, it fails.
Okay, I don't think they really did much with Marx's theories to build the USSR.
They literally had classes in the Soviet Union and China. I have Chinese friends. They studied Marxist texts in school.
And?
Like Lenin would quote Marx when he made decisions.
I mean, there were. Did we saw that video of History Time, or I don't remember the channel, but how the Soviet Union had millionaires?
I know enough about the Soviet Union to know that it's about as communist as Nazi Germany was. I have no respect for the
What
Soviet
separates the theory of true communism from the Christian kingdom of heaven?
Because you can take a look at what the USSR was doing, and none of it had anything to do with the political. Why can you say real communism? Why do you interrupt?
Why can't you say real fascism hasn't been tried by that logic?
Wait, no, hold on. Because when fascists say, I want X to happen, and then you look at Nazi Germany, that happened. When you take a look at what Marx said he wanted to happen, and then look at the USSR, none of it happened. Nothing. Literally nothing. There's no...
Interesting. The monarch hasn't had power in Britain since 1680s. Yeah, it's very clear that Vaush is very smart in sociology, in modern, sociology, but he's not, history is definitely not his stronghold. England. Oh yeah, there we go. I was waiting for you, Thomas, to comment on this. England and later on Britain was a constitutional monarchy by the 1700s. Absolutely, 100%. To say that the UK wasn't democratic, Britain wasn't democratic by the 1700s, especially by the time of the American Revolution. You know, it's just not
Again,
correct.
you can do this no true Scotsman all you want, and I agree. Okay, there are always thresholds, fine lines you can draw, but no, I don't own up to any of that. You take a look at Marxist theory, and then you take a look at the USSR. No relationship at all.
Let me break this down. Communism has been tried in many different forms. It's been tried with Bolivarian communism in South America. It's been tried under Castro, which was very independent from the Soviet Union.
You know, for a person who claims to be an intellectual, you sure do like going on like bumper sticker tangents.
It's been tried under a Marxist Trotskyite version. There's third world socialism, which took over.
So wait, I have to ask sincerely.
Socialism in India.
Given we have so little time to talk, is there a reason why you're filibustering?
They're just talking
reading this text,
over each other
as a Bible, and then trying their own thing. And each
Whatifalthist
fail.
I have to ask: are you filibustering because you have 4 minutes left?
Are impossible.
Let me
finish with one quick.
No, wait. We're 4 minutes till you have to go, which you announced 3 minutes ago, and you're filibustering with something that has nothing to do with anything I've talked about.
Okay,
this has been your response to every point you don't have an answer to. You run off to the next thing, or you say indignantly. You sounded.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, they had representation, but nothing that would look good by today's standards. Oh no, yeah, absolutely, 100%. You know, I think just the argument. I think Vaush was trying to paint the UK as like an absolute monarchy, where the king had like absolute power, which that wasn't true. Sure, you know, the way Britain was ruled in the 1700s wouldn't look absolutely good at all by today's standards, but it had some democratic processes. It had some representation that a lot of countries, especially in Europe, did not have at the time.
Indignantly, like, well, I've already answered that by not answering it. You're not engaging with the thing that I'm saying.
This is all stuff you've done in your past debates, bro. You're just
past debates. Yeah. Come on, you can't be mad about how this one is going. So pretend that you have some kind of history of my behavior to call upon. We talked privately before this convo. You were fine and civil.
I mean, Vaush has had a history of like really shitty debates. So
now you're here filibustering. What's changed? Nothing, but your
filibustering. What changed the precedent you set that I followed?
Your nerves, Whatifalthist.
Okay. Maybe
so you have to leave in 3 minutes. Should we talk now about which countries you think are communist, or is there some underlying position you would like to arrive at? What's wrong with social justice?
It doesn't work.
How not?
I don't have 3 minutes to answer.
It worked before. Worked during the abolitionist days, suffragist days, civil rights movement.
Oh God, we're talking about the same point that we were talking about at the beginning. Social justice works. Social justice is what happened in civil rights. That wasn't social justice.
Let me
in a manner which you're not able to describe, define, or delineate.
I describe it as a philosophy based off the combination of the Frankfurt and the postmodernist school.
What's wrong with postmodernism?
That is built upon the theory that power is the ultimate relationship of human power. Is the ultimate.
Oh wait! That wasn't the joke. Nero actually picked a random guy in the streets and raped him, and forced him to have sex change operation. Oh my God! So this is wow. I did not knew that. Thank you for that fact. Definitely very interesting. I think it's just one of those history facts that it's just funny for whatever reason. Well, it's not funny to be raped. It is actually like, yeah, it's pretty disturbing, but I don't know how the civil rights movement wouldn't qualify as social justice in the same way as the suffrage movement for women.
Relationship inside human societies, and the purpose of a society is to fight against said oppression, and that we should structure our civilization around combating
because it is social justice, but
and built upon the theory that there are no.
I think what they disagree upon is that, you know, civil rights is related to Marxism and BLM is related to civil rights. So by that definition, like social justice is mostly influenced by Marxism. And I think they had like a big disagreement about that.
Relationships outside power.
Don't you think that we should fight oppression? And
I
also,
think
they
we
don't
should,
claim there are no
but
social relations
we
outside
should
power.
I think we should be critical and intelligent about it rather than just trying to slide everyone into a black or white worldview based on whether or not they fight oppression.
Wait, hold on. You think postmodernism, the philosophy around believing there's no objective truth or narrative, slides people into black or white sides?
Yeah,
Isn't
that's
that mutually
obvious.
contradictory?
That's obvious to anyone who's looking at this critically.
Wait, so it's an ideology which rejects empirical truth and encourages a multifaceted approach towards social analysis.
There's balance
But
to everything.
also, you think